All right, Code Squad, Squad. All right, for now, what we have is the register controller screen, whatever you want to call it. But we have the first name, last name. We have it set up, but when we press the register button, we essentially want to store our new users' information somewhere. So that's where the Firestore database comes into play. So I have my I went to Firebase. You can just Google search that. We're going to select Nilvac Practice. But then we can get started with authentication, or you can select it right here. We need to set up a sign-in method. We're going to do email password. We're going to enable this email link passwordless sign-in. Yeah, we're not going to worry about that. It's my first time seeing that one. But now we can register our users into our Firestore database with email and password authentication. So let's go ahead and start writing some code. So of course, first we want to import Firebase from React Native Firebase. And now what we have to do is we have to set, we're going to call this function handle set first name local state. So when I write my functions, sometimes they're really long, but they're really detailed, and that's because I want to understand exactly what I'm doing when I read the function. This dot set state, we're going to do first name and semicolon. We're going to do it like that. All right, so what we also have to do is come up here and do constructor props, super props, and this dot state equals, we're going to have a first name input, spelled first name wrong. It's going to start off as an empty string. We're going to have a last name. We're going to have an email. And we're going to have a password. Password, everything lowercase. And yeah, so this constructor props and super props, it isn't needed. You can put this dot state. It's only necessary whenever you already have an existing property, but we're just going to keep it. It doesn't hurt to have it neither. Unused state field. All right, so let's see what we have to do now. So now on text input first name, we're going to run a function whenever we change the text. So unchanged text equals, we're going to call this dot handle set first name local state. So essentially, we press this first name on the keypad, and if you want to use your keyboard on your cell phone, you can hold command press K and it should pop up. I'm not going to do that because it's easier to type for me on my keyboard on my laptop. But so if you type in I don't know, Calvin, you can then this function would run, because every time we change the text, so when I put C, the function will run, A, the function will run, L, the function will run, and it's always going to set our first name local state. It's hard to explain, so I'm trying to just show you what it does. So I'm gonna hold command and press D, and I'm gonna run debug.js remotely. And this is going to bring up our debugger. Select in what I did was right click or double click on the keyboard, and I selected inspect. Then I press console, and now this is our debugger. So it shows you what happened when things and functions and everything runs. Trying to put all this on the same screen is kind of hard. So let's also run console.log first name is first name, and command R this, rerun it, bring this up. Whenever I type C, it says first name is C. Whenever I type A, first name is A. So it brings up, every time you type, it brings it up. I could backspace and it shows that it's been backspaced as well. So this will work well. So whenever someone types in their name, last name, or email address, and when they register and they send it off to the Firestore database, we can have the exact wording. All right, so that means that we would have to do this also for the last name. So I'm gonna say handle set last name local state. So of course we'll have to change this to last name. Do the same thing for email. Handle set email. And password as well. Password, 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 handle set, password. All right, and local state is just because these are local states, this dot state, and we're changing our local state variable whenever we set the state again. All right, so we have them all set for password. So we have to run these, do the same thing. So whenever we change the text for last name, this dot handle last name, email address, unchanged text, equals this dot handle set email local state, unchanged text. Ooh, why did it put it in brackets? Equals this dot handle password set local state, and think we're good there. All right, so now what we need to do is write a function that handles registering our user. So we don't need this function right now. We could run handle register our user. And constant, so email equals this dot state dot email. So what this does is it grabs our email address from the local state right here, and we're going to run that every time we press the register button. So before I get too far into it, let me show you exactly what it does and what I mean by that. So on our touchable opacity right here, we want to say unpress equals, and we're going to run the function handle register user. So unpress, we're going to handle register user. So every time we press the register button, it's going to do that. So I'm going to run this in the console debugger so you can see exactly what we get. So console.log, and I'm going to just say email. So let's see, command save, command R, rerun it. So whenever we click on the email address, we type in COD. It says email is COD because it runs this function every time we change the text. And it also sets the email address. So the email address is COD right now. So when we press register, it should give us COD because we said every time we press the register button, we're going to run this handle register user function. So if we run it again and we press it right off the back, you see how it gave us nothing. It gave us blank. And that's because email starts off being empty. The state starts off as being an empty string. And that's the same thing for all of them. First name, last name, email address, and password. There is no actual value in it until someone types in the word. So I know I'm explaining it a lot and talking a lot. Hopefully me just talking makes sense. It's not confusing. But like I said, as always, as long as we keep on doing it, it's going to make sense eventually. So email is assigned a value but never used. We got to use it. Use object destructuring. So that just means they want us to put this in brackets. If essentially if this word email is the same thing as this word, if it has the same word, then you can do destructuring, which is basically like that. Then you remove that. So this reads the same way. It's saying our constant email is going to equal this.state.email. And we can do the same thing for password, first name, and last name. And let's give ourselves a little bit more space. This is just a way to format our constants, so you can read it as just one long line like that. And essentially all this is saying again, email equals this.state.email, password equals this.state.password. So whatever the value that our new user puts in here is going to be read in here. So now what we need to do is say firebase.auth.create user dot create user with email and password. So we need to put in the email address that we received from our user and a password that we received from our user. And we can say space dot then. So this is just a promise. So it's saying once we create the user, then we want to run another function or do something else. And what we're going to do is store that information into our Firestore database, which I haven't shown you yet, but we'll show you pretty soon. So we're going to say constant Firebase root ref stands for reference, and we're going to say fs for Firestore equals Firebase dot Firestore, and we're going to say constant user ID. So this is the unique ID that the user receives, equals user dot UID. And this user is going to right here and grabbing the data that comes from when we create the email and password. So now we have to, I'm going to console log this, console.log. So that you can see the user ID that is made. User ID is user ID, which is the user ID we just created right here, that constant. Now we're going to say constant user ref. Like I said, ref stands for reference equals Facebook. I said Facebook. Firebase root reference fs equals I'm tripping. Dot collection users dot doc user ID. And sometimes you can also, if your line is getting too long, you can break it down like this. And this, that's just a quick tip. So if your line gets too long, you can essentially just break it down and space it over 2 times, and it runs the same. It's just that so your length of your work gonna be so long. But .doc user ID, like that. And then we get user ref dot set, and we want to set the email first name and the last name. So remember, when we're writing this is the shorthand way, and essentially it's just saying the same thing as we want to set an email key and give it the value of our email right here. But it's gonna, ESLint complains and says that it wants the shorthand rule, so we have to keep it like that. But then we have to run a catch error. We're gonna say console.log. I'm gonna say cannot create registered user. So this is if we get an error, we get a mistake. It's going to try to run this function, create user, email, and password. And if it finds an error for some reason, it runs this console.log cannot create registered user. And we want it to spit out that error, the error right here. So this is just a way to handle our work if there's any thing that bad happens. Alright, so I know I just talked a lot and did a lot, so let me try to explain and show you what happens. So now let's say that command rerun. So first let me show you the database. We're going to work with Firestore right now. Start in lock mode, allow rewrite if false, start in test mode. We're gonna start in lock mode because what we're doing, we're registering our user. So they should have access to our Firestore database. All right, so let's see. So you can add a collection. So let's see, essentially the structure that we're looking for is something like this. So we want to have our users, then we want to have an auto ID for that user, then we're going to have an email address for that user. It's going to be a string. Let's just say code squad ces@gmail.com. And we're going to have another field called first name, and it's going to be like, it's going to also be a string. Just use my name for instance, and it's going to have a last name, and it's going to be like that. So if we save this, you can see how it looks. So we're going to have a collection of users, and they're going to have their own unique ID, and each user is going to have an email address, first name, and a last name. So that's the information that we get from when they type it in. So this is kind of the setup, so you can see how it looks. But of course, we can't literally type in every single person that registers. So what we're going to do is write it out in code. So we're going to delete that. I just wanted to give you a preview of how we want our information to look. So let's see how this pans out. So if we do Calvin Smith code squad at gmail.com, and we just give it a random password. Let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 A's, all lowercase. Such a hard password, right? All right, so it's it's a deprecated function. So that function is, I'm going to Command Shift open and type in handle register user. It's right here, create user with email and password. It says that it should be a different function called create user and retrieve data with email and password. So that one. And I'm gonna see if my parameters should be the same thing. Parameters of email, password string. So yeah, what we have was fine. Email, password. And it also said that we have a unhandled promise. The caller does not have permission to execute the specified operation. All right, so we have to go to our rules. Rules, database, go to rules. And then it says allow read and write if false. So what we should say is if request.auth.uid is not equal to null, and what that's saying is if the person who's putting in their information should be able to have read and write access to our database if they have been authenticated, if they have a unique UID. So let's try that one and see how it pans out. So I'm gonna just command run it just to restart it. Calvin Smith. I'm gonna give myself just a different name to actually be able to see it. If we give ourselves the same name, it'll be hard to distinguish between which one is which. Code Squad 2@gmail.com. Password AAAAAAA. Register. Let's go to our database data. But then we get it. Alright, so we started off in locked mode previously, so when we do that, it looks into our rules. And when we work with our rules, we have to make sure rules are set up so that it keeps the people in who should be into our database and keeps the people out that should be out of our database. So if you're not registered into our app database, then you shouldn't be able to read any information or write any information to our data. I could make another video. We can get more into detail into that, but let's just keep it pushing for now. So we have users, and then that user has their unique UID. Then they have their email address, first name and last name. Once you register, and it should show the unique ID in our user ID is undefined. So user UID is undefined right here. All right, Code Squad. So the fact that we were getting an error and undefined in our debugger is pretty important, because if you look in our authentication, it says that the user UID. So user UIDs are ways to identify specific users. And if you look at it for like CS, it says HJF. You can go to our database. We have CS is WD5. So like I said, unique IDs are ways to identify specific users. So if they mismatch and are not the same, we're not going to be able to identify our users. So that's pretty important. We want to make sure that we have the right user and their correct information. So I'm going to show you the way that I found the error so that you'll be able to learn how to debug and find out errors as well. So I think the error is kind of strange, but check this out. So I know for a fact that this user is correct. I just don't know. I didn't know if the right name behind this. So user.uid. I knew it was user.something. So what I did was I put in a constant user ID equals user and see what it spits out in the debugger. So command R that, and I reload after I change the function sometimes, because if you hot reloading is for like if you change views. So like disable hot reloading. Hot reloading is more so if you like are playing with the design of the layout, if you want to move real fast. But if you work with changing functions, I think you have to reload it. So we're gonna say, let's just give myself a different name to be able to find that. Mike R at gmail.com. A. Register. So we go to our debugger now. It says user. It says user ID is, so user is this information right here. But then it has another object of, additional user info, user, and prototype. Then under this user, it has our UID. So essentially, we have to call user, then call user again, then go into here and get our UID. So it's user UID. So it's kind of strange, but that's what they want us to call it. So it's user.user again .uid. And you know that's correct because when you type it in, the UID automatically is filled. It comes up. So that's another hint. All right, so that goes right there. Command R. Let's just, man, I'm running out of names. I don't know that many names. I don't know. Ashton M at gmail.com. So now that it gives us our user ID is that. So JJ, let's look into our database. So let's look into our authentication. So for Ashton M is JJ, which is the same thing that we found. In our database, it has JJ is our ID, and that's Ashton M. So now things are linked up together, and that's a good sign. So we know that we're registering our users into our database in our authentication folder correctly. And one last thing before we wrap this video up, I want to, so instead of using strings, I don't really like to use strings because things can change over time. And what we're going to do is, all right, so what we're going to do is add a new folder, and let's say config for configuration. And then inside this folder, we want to add a folder of I'm gonna just call it global. And then inside here, we want to have a new file, Firestore references .js file. And here what we're going to do is say constant Firestore reference sys equals, actually let's make that singular, rename, just for preference I want to keep it singular. So Firestore reference, let's say users, and we want to say users. We're going to export default Firestore reference. I think that wants a semicolon, yes. And now we can call this. So we can say import Firestore reference from come out, config global Firestore reference. But then when we use this, we can say, instead of saying users, we can say dot Firestore reference dot users. And that's just because whenever we're going to use these references a lot, and instead of having to change every single string where those strings are located, we can just go into this Firestore reference and just change the value from here if we ever wanted to change the word users, and it would change it in all the different locations. So I know that's kind of, I just said a lot and that probably didn't make too much sense, but it's a way to keep things organized well for us. And like I said, organization is always key. So that's it for today's video, you all.